Hello and welcome. Again, just taking a moment to arrive. Just noticing whatever residual energy might still be in the body or in the mind from whatever you might have just been doing. And take this as an opportunity to just surrender that or drop that. And even by trying to drop it, just noticing that it's there, letting it pass. See if there's any space to drop deeper. And become heavier. You can keep your eyes open, or you can soften your gaze or close your eyes. Again, this is just a guide, a suggestion, but really for you to find your own path in each moment. And maybe on the exhale, feeling yourself become heavier, more surrendered into the chair, the floor. Whatever's underneath you, supporting your body. And again, we offer this as invitations rather than expectations. So we just see what happens. On the exhale, as we let go. We're not trying to force ourselves to let go if letting go doesn't want to happen. So if there's holding on or tension or contraction, can there be space for that too? Noticing what it's like, if it should be part of your experience, to give it permission to be there. The holding on, the tension, the tightness. And if not, simply again on each exhalation, just offering up this invitation drop to become heavy, more relaxed and rested. As if not one muscle in your body was needed or required to hold you up, becoming that relaxed. Just noticing, checking in with self if there's any subtle trying to relax, trying to surrender, subtle efforting going on. And just seeing if you can drop that. Just letting the body let go on its own. And for some of us, maybe bringing our attention to our breath, especially if the mind is busy or tense, can be helpful to really ground in the moment. Bring our attention out of the head and more into the body. It may or may not be helpful if you feel to just reside more in the whole body awareness, that's okay too. But if there is this natural movement, or if it feels inspired to move into the breath, to allow that to happen. Again, just noticing if there's any subtle trying or efforting that creeps in. Not making it into a problem, but just noticing it and being willing to drop it as best you can. And it might feel more peaceful, open with the breath being long and slow. But if that's not what's happening, can we just be with the breath as it is? And maybe or maybe not, even just noticing the permission for it to be as it is sometimes can reveal more space to allow it to deepen on its own. But again, not holding on to that as an idea of what should be happening or an expectation that it should happen. And maybe noticing if any tension or contractions have creeped in or become known in awareness. And again, just see if there's any space to invite them to soften, to relax. So just as you allow your body to be as it is, and your mind and your permission to whatever might seem to be around you, or other sights or sounds. Possibly even smells or felt sense of touch. There may or may not be something that's present or obvious, and we don't need to go searching, but just notice if there's any resistance to any of the senses that might be present now. Granting the same permission for it to be as it is. And possibly even seeing if there's any space to drop it, to drop whatever resistance might be present. And another subtle form of resistance we may or may not notice is this belief to be the meditator, that we're doing meditation or a subtle trying to meditate. Or someone who's having the experience of meditation, and just notice if there's this sense present within you. And if not, it's fine. We don't need to go on a search to try to find it. Just become aware if there might be this subtle sense of me in here, that there's any space to drop that. That sense of separation, that there's me over here that's meditating and meditation happening in my experience, or a meditation is separate from me. Just notice. And see if there's any space to drop that, to just be the meditation. And if it moves your energy too much into the mind to try to figure it out or understand, then don't worry about it. Just be as you are. Trusting that that's enough, and whatever needs to be revealed or known will appear in its own time, without us having to go on a chase to try to understand or figure it out. letting go of all expectations of how this moment should be. Always knowing that if it becomes very mind centered or we feel very distracted, we can always come back to the breath or the feeling of the body against the chair, the feet, or the hands, sensations in the feet and the hands. And if for you it becomes overwhelming, always knowing that you can softly open your eyes or open your eyes completely to reground yourself. Taking all ideas and restrictions and limitations and concepts, letting all of that fall away and just being. As if we had no idea how to be. There was nothing to compare it to. And we can begin to open our eyes softly. Just noticing if we can have our eyes open and grounded in the body. See if we can have our eyes open without leaving ourselves, without moving our attention outward. To really stay in this place of restedness where we allow and we're receptive to allow all of the stimuli to come to us, appear to us. Just notice whatever sensory input we might be receiving, if there is this movement to go outward to try to understand or figure it out or grab hold. Instead, redirect it back towards ourselves. Back, staying rooted in ourself. It might be helpful to feel our hands or our feet, to notice the breath coming in, to feel that sense of rest and relaxation into whatever we might be seated upon, to really help us stay grounded in our own being. To then open ourselves and allow the stimuli to come. And there's no right or wrong, no need to shame ourselves if we notice that that movement is outward. We're just observing and noticing how that shows up in our experience. Possibly the subtle contractions that result maybe around the eyes. I know I notice it around the eyes when my focus is more outward. Or possibly around the chest and a hunching forward. Or in the limbs and a pulling inward. Or in the shoulders and kind of a clenching upward. This is where we can become very acquainted with our own body and our own ways in which we separate or pull back or move outward, leave ourselves in moving outward towards the world. So nothing isn't wrong, whatever we see. It's just becoming aware of it, noticing how it shows up for us in this moment. There might be patterns that we notice and how we continually separate, or it might just be fresh and new each moment. I guess one thing I might share today, this might be a shorter talk, but just really being acutely aware of how we grab hold of thoughts. This has been so powerful for me this last week, is that there's been some really sticky thoughts that come in, reflecting on my own experience this week. It's not necessarily that something's off and that something shouldn't be looked at or paid attention to, but that there was this fear base that like grabbed hold of it and was like, something needs to be done about this now. This is too much. This is too much. And this kind of this the anxiety that can be provoked from that. So really noticing in our own experience the tendencies with, there might be something that's noticed and can be, we create this space around it where we can just observe it and allow it to be there while still taking action on it if that's what's being called. But sometimes it grabs hold of us and it's such a strong emotion or such a strong impulse that we layer over it this sense of, I got to get rid of this and this is something wrong right now. And then all of these old impulsive behaviors that are reactive to the situation take hold, start flowing through us. So it can be really powerful to notice those thoughts as they come in, those thoughts that have this kind of stickiness or that something is inherently wrong right now and needs to be done. And the patterns that then take hold when we grab hold of that reactivity and layer that reactivity on top of whatever is happening. That even me, I could see myself do it. I could see that there was these feelings, something definitely didn't feel right in my experience. And yet the ability in that moment, there was no space around it. And this is okay. This is what we see. So even for me, I can get lost in the stickiness of it and then create all of these reactive responses on it. And this is the power, is that we see it. That there was this grabbing hold of it, that something's wrong and needs to be fixed right now. And how that spiraled into all of these like reactive responses of trying to get things to be different somehow. And really what I keep pointing to over and over in these talks is that when we can, it's not that nothing needs to be done. We might feel this something's not right in our experience, that something needs to be taken care of or looked at or whatever it is. Something feels very uncomfortable and it's calling us to it, to pay attention to it. And when we can create that space around it, we can allow it to be there. We can rest, even though it's a little uncomfortable or a lot uncomfortable. And allow it then to unfold and guide us into how to respond to it. What happens is so often there's this reflex where it feels uncomfortable, it feels overwhelming, it feels too much, it feels something's wrong, and then all of these reactive responses come in, trying to make it go away, try to fix it, solve it, trying to get out of it as quick as possible. And again, it's okay if that how all of these reactive responses are layered on top of it to try to get us out of it. Again, it's so innocent and so naive. It's trying to keep us safe. It doesn't want our system to be overwhelmed. But that's so often, so many of those reflective, reactive responses are coming from the past fears. Or future projections, what's going to happen if. And we can just notice all of this. Notice our tendency to still grab hold of certain thoughts, certain patterns, certain reactive responses. And what that does, how that plays out in our lives. That's where the power is when we begin to notice the suffering. Then it's not only just the suffering of being uncomfortable, but it's the suffering of all of the reactivity, the clinginess, the rejection of whatever uncomfortableness is, that something's inherently wrong and shouldn't be there. so immediately we try to push our experience away, try to make it go away. And it's so interesting to observe the mind, because sometimes things will come in and they'll just float right by, like negative thoughts or what ifs, or they won't have any glue. But the ones that have the glue, that stick around, that feel real, usually have some story attached to them, some story of deficiency. This is where that past comes in. That there's some core belief within us that they're triggering, that I'm not okay, or I'm not going to be okay, or I'm not safe in this world, or this is too hard, too difficult. And we can just notice that too, the stories that are attached, the underlying, beneath the circumstance. Because there's a circumstance, but the circumstance is really just a circumstance. It's what we do with the circumstances, the stories, the deep beliefs that we carry about ourselves, about life, that then interact with the circumstances of our life and create either nothing, it just kind of flows by and we don't even notice it. There might be just a little bit of stickiness, or it might be like extremely sticky, extremely fearful, or extremely agitated. It's not the situation itself, as we can see in so many of our lives, that the situation, different people experience the same situation and they have different responses. But it's how it interacts with our past, with our beliefs and deep, deep conditioned beliefs about ourselves, about life, that then make it the stickiness that then we grab hold of and use to either validate or affirm our ideas about life, our fears about life. This can happen in a positive or negative way. That to really see the suffering in that when we grab hold of it, this idea of who we are, what life is. How the circumstances interact with our beliefs about life, and then how the suffering then is created. And so to notice, to even take pause, to notice when that agitation, there's a certain circumstance that comes in very sticky and feels very real. But as much as possible to create this space where we can see that. Oh, it's creating this reaction in me that's extremely uncomfortable. And to pause and to see look at the thoughts. What are the thoughts saying? What are we believing? What are the thoughts revealing that we believe about ourselves, about life, about the world? This has been extremely powerful for me in the last while, just really noticing that there were so many stories playing out in my experience that I wasn't aware of. That it was true that life is difficult and that there's been so much losses, and projecting all of those ideas into the future. We don't realize it, but these beliefs that we carry, then when we start living them out, that life is this way, and this is true, and then we start unconsciously looking for ways to validate that. And again, this doesn't mean that we it's not about trying to get us somewhere else, but the more we see this and open to us, the less those patterns have to keep recreating themselves in our life and shaping how we perceive the circumstances of our life. I'm not sure if this is totally connected or not. We'll see how this goes. But what's really been on my mind lately also is just I've had the privilege of beginning to work with this individual that's in a wheelchair. Just noticing how surrendered his life is. Not just seeing him as an object that's in a wheelchair. Oh, it's so touching, really. But as a human being that has had to give up everything pretty much at other people's whim, has to ask for everything, even a glass of water to be changed, to turn the TV on or off, to be adjusted. That everything has been asked to let go of this individual. It's just powerful to really take that in. So often we can have these expectations of what life is and needs to be and look like, and get lost in this, not knowingly, but this righteous attitude that we deserve these things in life, and these expectations are real and true and necessary, anything in life. But to see how there's a within us that can open ourselves to all of that. It doesn't mean we like it or we want it to be that way. But it reveals in a way how we can be with our life circumstances in a way that opens us, avails us, that's not fighting what is. Really, so often we take life so personally. We think that we are these bodies. Really, we have no power to be in certain bodies and not in other born into certain bodies and not other bodies. Or yet once we're here, then we claim this is me and I did this and I created this. And I created these thoughts, and I have the power to change. Just noticing all of that can really open our eyes when we see all of the sort of righteous attitudes that we hold of ownership of our experience and expectations of what we need to be okay. Again, none of this is wrong, that it's not about denying our bodies, of letting go of all expectations, but noticing how when we grab hold of all of this, create this sense of self around it, then there's all of these ideas, these protective mechanisms that have to come into place to protect and defend the self. And then when circumstances come that don't match our idea of ourself, how then they trigger these deep core beliefs within us. Core beliefs of I am bad, or I'm not lovable, or I'm not wanted, or life is hard, life is meaningless, whatever story we might be or belief we might be carrying underneath. And this doesn't mean to deny the emotional response, of course. If we were in a situation like that, anyone was in a situation like that, I'm sure there would be feelings of total hopelessness, helplessness, defeat, despair. There may or may not be, again, this is my own projection, looking at my own experience and projecting what I might be feeling. But how we all do this. We all look at someone else and project and think we know what they would or should or shouldn't be feeling or are or aren't feeling based on how we would be in that situation. But again, we all have different conditioning, different genetics, different conditioning from the environment that we grew up in, the experiences that we've had in the past, that then trigger different reactions to different circumstances. So to be with our experience in a way as much as possible where we can create space around it or open ourselves, or at least maybe even invite in the space if it doesn't feel full, if it doesn't feel like there's any space, just even praying or surrendering or asking for space to be revealed. So that some insight can be perceived as to what the stickiness quality is all about, what beliefs might be at play that's creating this suffering. And so often we just see, oh, well, it's the circumstances that's creating the suffering. But again, reminding ourselves that the circumstances play out differently in different people's lives. It's not necessarily the circumstance. It's how we are in relationship to the circumstance and the beliefs that we have about the circumstance that are triggered. And so the more that we open ourselves and become curious and want to know really what am I believing? What are the thoughts in me telling me that I believe about life? And it may not be obvious at first. Our thoughts become so repetitive and so that they actually feel like they're true. We've thought them so many times that we actually feel that they're true. That the truth is in the thoughts. And so it can sometimes be really hard to see our stories or the beliefs that are in them because it feels like there isn't a story, it's just the result, it's just the circumstance. But again, if we slow things down, we can begin to see that there's these beliefs that are in there that are interacting with the circumstances of life that are creating our responses, our reactivity. And again, we have to be, well, I welcome or encourage to be so gentle with ourselves because some of these can be very deep and painful stories that we carry. I'm not wanted. Life is difficult. Life is meaningless, purposeless. Or I can't do it. Or I am bad, or I am unlovable, I am unworthy, whatever belief might be hidden within that story is really what's being asked to be seen and met and loved and nurtured. Not to see it and then try to fix it and overcome it and make it go away, but to really take that in and feel the pain of that belief. To feel the pain of the belief, I can't do it, or I am unlovable, or I'm not wanted, or the belief that life is hard and difficult. To truly meet it and see it for what it is. A conditioned, painful belief that we've added and layered upon our experience that filters we see and interact and perceive the world, the other, the self. That despite how it might feel incredibly true is not necessary, isn't true. And this doesn't mean that we're then just going to be open arms and willing to just surrender our lives and be in a wheelchair or whatever might be asked of us on this journey. No. Doesn't mean we have to want all of those things or that we'll be then asking for those things to come to us. But it opens us to meet our experience in a more available way, this open and receptive way. Where again, we're not at war with our experience. We're not adding on these layers of suffering to our experience. We're not using the circumstances of life to validate our ideas. We begin to see through that it's just an idea that whatever, life is difficult or life is painful or I'm not worthy. The more we can see it as part of our conditioning that we've picked up and not necessarily the truth about life or telling us really anything about any experience. Knowing that it could be someone else and they could have a totally different response to it begins to like crack that egg of solidity in the belief that it's not an absolute truth. Until we can see it's not even a relative truth, it's just this idea that we've picked up somewhere along the line, and then we've continued to hold on to it and compare all experiences to it to validate it, to tell us that it's true, so that our belief in it becomes more and more solid, more and more real, more and more truth-like. So then as we start peeling back the layers and seeing, oh, it's just an idea that I picked up along the way that I've been validating. Then more and more we can see the circumstances of our life more clear, more open, more receptive without jumping on and adding all these layers of reactivity to it, trying to make it go away, trying to jump into defending it or pushing it away or using it to validate. Of course, so all of this is so unconscious. We're not intending to create all of this suffering, but this is the pattern of the mind that we've become so conditioned in doing that we don't even realize. So we can't blame or shame ourselves for it, for adding on these layers of suffering. It's more of this opening and unveiling and taking away all of these layers of belief so that the circumstances of our lives don't feel so sticky, so that we don't feel so reactive to them. That we can see them in more of this place of equanimity or neutrality. So if anything, I can leave you with this invitation to simply see the circumstances of our lives that feel really sticky and evoke all of this reactivity. And to see if there's any space, or you can invite any space around it to really inquire into that. What is this circumstance of my life reacting with? What are the stories I'm telling myself about this circumstance? And what do those stories reveal about what I believe about myself, about the world, about life? And then beginning to see if there's any space to meet those beliefs. And it's not a process that we necessarily do one time and we've healed things, but to continue to be in this space of open inquiry where we're willing to meet whatever it is that wants to be known, that's wanting to be seen, exposed, revealed, healed. I know for me that there's been several different circumstances where that same core belief keeps coming up. And this doesn't mean that I haven't done work or that all of my ability to be with it in the past hasn't been purposeful or useful. It's like it's taking pieces of that shell off bit by bit so that there's less and less reactivity in general. There might be instances where it's really intense and grab hold. But in general, it becomes less and less intense, more ability to, and more space around it, more ability to reflect, to see, to not take it so personally. And so then we just keep coming back, willing to see again, willing to see what other pieces remain. Maybe even exposing new stories that we didn't even know that we were carrying, or beliefs maybe that have crept up on us since adulthood. Sometimes those beliefs come from childhood and they've deeply rooted in us, and sometimes there's been experiences in our adult life that have actually begun to reshape and create new beliefs about life. These are the ones that I've become more aware of, is that some of these ones from childhood have been seen, exposed. There's been a lot of healing around, but noticing, oh, there's new stories that I've developed over the last about 10 years of life from the circumstances that have played out, the difficulties and losses that have taken place, that I've created these new painful stories about life. Not even aware that they're, again, they can be so familiar that they feel real and true, that this is really how life is. But it's by slowing that whole process down that we can see, oh, it's just a circumstance that's playing out. And there's many different ways of perceiving that circumstance, but the way I'm perceiving it is extremely painful. So what is the story? What is the underlying belief that is being triggered by this circumstance? And then again, invite it forward. And this way we don't leave ourselves, we continue again, that everything in life is then is food for us, to deepen us in our sense of self, to deepen us in our own experience and awareness, and be more and more inclusive of different parts of ourself, different emotional experiences within ourselves. And it can be so subtle because we so often think that that's wrong, from I shouldn't be discovering all of these beliefs yet, or I shouldn't be feeling these emotions yet after all of the work I've done. But again, we stay in this open space where it just keeps allowing and expanding, including more and more parts of ourselves that we didn't know necessarily were even there. And the paradoxical thing is that we do this from this place of openness, from this place of wholeness. When we're in this open spaciousness, that there's already this sense of wholeness, That we're not doing all of this work, doing all of this investigation to try to get us somewhere else, to make us more whole or to make us more acceptable or make us more worthy. When we're doing it with an agenda like that, it's coming from this place of lack. Right now, I'm not enough. Right now, my experience isn't good enough. But when we're inviting it in with this curious, inquisitive attitude, we're doing it not to, because we're like this loving mother, this loving grandmother that's inviting all of you to be felt, to be loved. We're not doing it because we're trying to make our grandchildren better. There's already this inherent wholeness, this inherent love and connection that's there. And instead, we just want to make sure that they know that they're welcome. And we're welcoming in more and more parts of more and more grandchildren. So they're not out there in the cold alone. And as we do this, there's more and more space. I'm going to get somewhere, and I'm going to be able to be perfectly equanimous with all situations. It's very unlikely to happen. It may happen. Just letting go of all ideas of perfection, of being a human being, that no matter how much so-called come into our awareness, that want included, want to be brought into the light. In this way, it's not a bad thing. It's allowing us to become more and more open, more and more spacious, more and more available to life, more and more loving and compassionate towards all parts of ourselves and all parts of humanity, the more parts we meet within ourselves. So it becomes a different modus operandi, so to speak. We're not doing it to try to make ourselves okay. We're doing this in a way that expands and embraces and includes more parts of humanity, more parts of ourselves, that has more and more compassion for the human experience. Okay, so I was going to keep it short and I didn't, but thank you so much for joining. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Namaste.